father told me, tough. You got to stand on your own because no one's going to stand for you. You've got to find a way. So I ordered my life to do that, to live without mandates, to live without help from anybody. Okay? I take care of my loved ones take care of me. I understood that to be liberty. But what I see is a society that is basically inverted that. So I would ask you a yes or no question on this. Should I tell my grandchildren to give up that ghost?
No. My wife and I are approaching our 15th wedding anniversary. And we've got 2 kids. Our kids are 9 and 7. I happen to be, my parents didn't go to college. I was the first in my family to go to college to get an advanced degree. I saw my parents build up a small business on their own over 40 years so they could provide a better opportunity for me and my siblings. And I now, as a father, and my wife as our kid's mother, looks at the same principle, that we want to raise our kids, we want to have a good opportunity for them, for their future. I will not teach them to rely on other people.
Well, it seems society is evolving. Perhaps it already has evolved.
I think it has. I think it already has.
No longer practical.
I think.
And that is very disturbing to someone such as myself, who has invested his life ordered in such a way. All right.
It's hard.
Now I'm being hit on the other end, where I was hit on the beginning of my life. It was a very difficult period to adjust psychologically, emotionally, and physically. Not to mention financially. And now that I'm on the other end of life, I'm going to get hit with the other expense that I shouldn't have to bear. I should be, well, I'll get into that in a minute. I just want to finish up on 2 points and then, because I don't want to take up too much time. There seems to be, at least in this part, an agreement that there needs to be more transparency with regard to medical costs. Now, as a person who is forced to pay cash for everything, and as I see the system evolve, I end up paying actually more than insurance companies do. And they're getting money from me in advance. Now, that seems to be a complete inversion of what ought to be. And I think that we've got a consensus here that more transparency. Because without that transparency, all you're doing is you've got a wide open door for fraud, and that fraud's going on all over the place in the medical world. And those people who have insurance, you don't pay attention to it. For the most part, it's not coming out of their pocket. But I can feel it deeply. It's your job, in my estimation, it's government's job at all levels to provide a system in which fraud has a minimum possibility, not a maximum possibility. And our present system offers essentially that maximum possibility. So I would strongly advocate that you do whatever you can to higher dramatically higher visibility in terms of what the costs are. I don't have this problem when I go to a restaurant, they give me a menu and the prices are on it, damn it. Why can't I get that in a hospital or in a doctor's office?
I agree with everything you just said. This is
I'm not hearing that coming out of Washington. I'm not hearing it coming out of Concord. I'm not hearing it coming out of the town hall of Hampton. Unfortunately, I'm not hearing that coming out of Congress.
Everywhere I go,
I want to hear this.
Everywhere I go, I talk about transparency. Look, one of the reasons that I decided to run in the first place was I saw a federal government that was broken. It wasn't working the way people, forget about political affiliation. It just wasn't working. And I spent 4 years prior to that trying to put a system in place in Manchester where there was transparency, where there was efficiency with taxpayer dollars, where taxpayers knew exactly where their dollars were going, where they had an opportunity to have their voice heard in how we spent their money. I mean, I feel as an elected official, you are, you have a fiduciary responsibility to the people you represent to be as effective and efficient.
I voted for you. I intend to do so again. But I want you to know some of the things I need you to do, I want you to do that I think are right, that strike to the very foundation of why government exists. And the failure to do that continues to undermine the legitimacy of the government. It dovetails into my next statement, got the Supreme Court decision on what is known as Obamacare. In Congress, I watched that in great detail, because, as I said earlier, I have kind of a cash investment in healthcare, right out of my pocket. In Congress, we were told over and over again that it's not a tax. And how many congressmen did I hear come up and say, I wouldn't vote for this if it were a tax? The Supreme Court decides it's a tax. This is a fraud to me. This is not just unconstitutional act. This is beyond a super legislative act from the Supreme Court. It is flat out fraud.
Well, here's how I look at it. Whether you pre-Supreme Court decision, whether you call it a penalty, a fee, a fine, or a tax. And the authors were calling it, I think, a fee. I think they were referring to it as a fee. But all four of those words essentially mean the same thing.
No, no. The Supreme Court said they don't mean the same thing.
No,
That's why they insisted on changing the word to a tax.
No, I know. I'm talking about
because it's under the taxing authority that they were affording the government to impose this penalty on me.
But I'm talking
on that
pre.
false label of calling it a tax when the black and white letter of Obamacare says fees, penalties, doesn't say tax. This is a flat out fraud.
For the purpose of the
I
conversation.
don't stand well with fraud, I apologize.
What?
Not that you're fraudulent, I'm not suggesting that. I'm referring to the government
I understand what your
Supreme
point
Court,
is.
specifically the Chief Justice.
For the
saying pre the court ruling.
yeah.
So
But he was saying those four words mean the same thing, and they do not legally mean the same
Well,
thing.
before the court ruling.
Yeah, let me just finish my statement so you understand what the point I'm trying to make. So before the Supreme Court ruling, there were four words that were used to describe. Some people used fee, some people used penalty, some people used fine, some people used tax. For the purposes, in my view, for the purposes of how does that apply to an individual if they're not complying with the law, it doesn't matter because it's all money coming out of your pocket. The Supreme Court then stated it was a tax and used that as the reason to justify it constitutionally.
Did he do that so that the Congress could control the thing? Do you think he did it on purpose?
You know, I don't know. No, I don't.
He did it because he didn't want to broaden the Commerce Act's scope. So this was a way to get around broadening the Commerce Act.
The reason the Supreme Court changed it to a tax is because the federal government has no authority to impose a fee and a penalty in such fashion. They do have an authority to impose a tax.
You're correct.
So the Supreme
That's
Court did a
correct.
dance and said, we got to find a way to legitimize what in fact was an entirely fraudulent legislation. Right from the get-go. The Louisiana Kansas pay them off. Oh, the Cornhusker kickback. For life, Nebraska doesn't have to pay any cost to Obamacare. Now, Nebraska, being good people, said we don't want that. We exempt ourselves from that. But the fact is, that was part of the legislation, that an entire state, for all eternity, doesn't have to pay Obamacare
There's
tax.
some other people here with questions. He's got to leave.
I said patiently, you go ahead and enjoy it, up
I
down.
just want one thing.
Sure.
About the medical thing. I know from personal experience, you should talk to some doctors about the medical care being suffering because of the cost. And they're being told that they've got to drop their methods, drop their testing, the standards are being reduced. It all comes down to the cost, and that's what the bottom line is. Second thing is, you've got Medicare through Obamacare or whatever you want to call it. You don't want it, and Nancy Pelosi said you got to read the bill to find out what's in it. That's, use the word ass backwards. The people in Congress should be writing the laws, the bureaucrats should be left out of it. You should know what it is, and you should know what it is before you can actually set it. We want bureaucrats to write these regulations, let them write it before, so we know what we're going to get. Because we're getting this cost shoved on our throat. They dropped the standards for medical care. Talk to some doctors, if you do, bring one with you with some of these
Sure.
meetings, and they can probably tell you exactly how bad it is right now and how bad it's gonna get. For example, we dropped the standard for hemoglobin. You have to have a 10 before you get a blood transfusion, which is what it's supposed to be. They changed that. Now, it's gonna be, you can have a 6 and still not get a blood
Are
transfusion.
you talking about for purposes of Medicare reimbursement?
Well, anything,
Yeah.
anything in any hospital, because they dropped the standards, they have the board, and as Sarah Palin called it, perhaps it will become, those 15 members will be what you call the death knell. Whether you want to call it that or not, that's what's gonna happen to us if we don't get this changed, at least get it back to what it was. It can be changed to make it better, but the way it is now, it's only gonna go downhill. I'm gonna say. Good luck.
Well, thank you. Is there any I've got to run out, so is there any, is there any other subject that hasn't been discussed that maybe people want me to try to, yes?
I'm just talking about local conditions, volunteer at a food pantry. But I'm also a retired social worker, and I've worked with the laws in the state. I'm still using, I've been going to look it up to see if we're still using the RSAs, which requires every community, when necessary, to provide common human needs, medication, food, shelter, all those common human needs. Most people don't know that.
You're talking about a state RSA.
In state and community.
Sure.
So I have referred people to the welfare administrator in this town and told them what by law they must provide if the need is.
If the need arises, sure. Yes, sir.
What committee are you on?
I was actually just appointed to the Financial Services Committee. Financial Services. The financial service, so I served for the first year and a half on budget, transportation, and oversight and government reform. I'm now on the Financial Services Committee as of about a month ago, which has jurisdiction over financial institutions, small and large, domestic monetary policy, international monetary policy, all insurance and insurance-related products, as well as all housing, HUD, Housing and Urban Development Department. So it'll be a busy committee because we'll be focusing a lot on Dodd-Frank. We'll be focusing a lot on Fannie and Freddie. We'll be focusing a lot on what components of the financial industry need to be solidified in order to try to move us out of the economic climate we're in. So it's going to be probably one of the three stools. I think in terms of the three-legged stool, you got to deal with spending, you got to deal with tax policy and tax reform, and you got to deal with the financial institutions and having a firm financial footing. I think those three are going to be sort of driving factors in what economic policy is established in the next term, in addition to obviously dealing with the Affordable Care Act and energy-related issues in the country. I think those are the 5 major issues that are going to be dealt with in the next Congress. So anyway, this has been great. If did you want to make a comment? Because I hate to leave without people making.
I just wanted to go, we're talking about fraud in government and all that stuff. It seems to me, and I may be wrong, but I don't think so, that the majority of people who run for elected office do so initially for the right reason. And then they get entrenched into the program and
Yeah.
they become corrupt. Is there a way that you can internally monitor those things and do something about it as a legislature, or is everybody just in the
Well, no, there are a couple of things that we've done. I mean, we've changed rules in this legislative session, this Congress. One, for example, is a 3-day rule in terms of voting. So a vote comes to the floor, a piece of legislation. It now has to sit for 3 days to give members an opportunity to read it. So, well, I can only, I mean, I was before my tenure. So it's one of the things that we did. And, you know, these aren't things that get a lot of publicity. You know, what doesn't get a lot of publicity is that we cut our own budgets 11.4%, not once but twice. I mean, that didn't get a lot of publicity, but we did that early, and then we did it again halfway through the year, really to say, hey, look, Congress has to act differently than in the past. People don't realize that. You know, probably most people know that there's no more earmarks anymore. I mean, just about everybody is taking an earmark ban pledge. So every piece of legislation that we put together in the House, there's no earmarks in it. I think that's a good thing. Relative to, you know, transparency with members, we passed the Stock Act in the House of Representatives. I know people don't hear about a lot of this stuff, and that's the frustration that I have as well, because you're not aware. So there's a couple ways that you can, and that deals with some of the issues relating to investments that you have, you know, information. You're not allowed to have information beforehand. I don't know if you remember, I don't know, 6-8 months ago now, there was some stories about some members that had information prior to selling certain assets.
Yeah, it's always curious to me how people go in not so wealthy and come out
Yeah.
wealthy.
Well,
Well, you're referring to insider trading in Congress, which has exempted itself from yet one of those laws on insider trading. correct?
except we just
And
passed the Stock
reason why
Act.
it's not getting out to the population is because Congress would just soon forget about it.
I know, but this Congress, we passed the Stock Act, which essentially does not exempt, you know, it addresses that issue.
A good thing. A good thing.
And it passed the House, and it passed bipartisanly. So there's a couple of ways that I would encourage you to try to get information. My federal website is guinta.house.gov. We actually got an award for how much information and how much transparency there is on my website. So we really try to provide as much information to you as possible. There's a little red button on there, a jobs tracker that shows how many pieces of legislation we passed in the House that are jobs related. We're over 40, almost, I don't want to give you a percentage, but a majority of them were passed bipartisanly. Most people don't know that or don't hear about that. All of these different pieces, they're all on that website. There's another thing you can do. Every Friday I send out an email from the federal account on what is going on the federal level. You have to actually opt into it. I can't just send it to you.
How much legislation have you put forth that actually repeals some legislation? I mean, we're being...
Quite a bit. I mean,
Okay, so
but
you-
all that's on my
you-
website, but
okay.
quite a bit. I mean, because I think one
Good.
of the ways you need to measure, you know, the size and scope of government is not just what you pass, but what you repeal. And there are certain things that people want repealed. You know, so there's a number of bills that I've actually sponsored and co-sponsored as repeal bills. But all of this information is on the website. And you can sign up for an email. It's a once, we don't share your email with anybody. You can get off of it anytime you want. Every Friday afternoon it comes to you. It shows a little bit about what's going on a weekly basis. You know, when I'm in DC, it's more legislative. When I'm in New Hampshire, it's more about what I'm doing in the district. So I would encourage you to sign up for that. If you don't want to, go to the website periodically. And if you have a question, call, you know, my Manchester office or my Washington office. We'll answer any question you have. Just to give you an idea of how much activity there is in New Hampshire, we've had now 120,000 emails, letters, and phone calls. That's pretty, in 18 months. We've responded to every single one within 3 days. And you get a specific, clear answer. You don't get an answer from me that is it's not.
I've been down the process. The gentleman is actually not bragging on himself. It's the truth.
I mean, but one of the things that I think is important when you're a representative is to at least provide information to people. I mean, some people don't like the answer that I give them. That's okay.
Mhm.
But I'm going to give you as specific as an answer as I possibly can. And if that doesn't satisfy you, we'll get on the phone with either me or someone in the office to go through the piece of legislation or the bill that you have. And I think that's just part of the job that we have and the responsibility that I have as your representative. So with that, I'm glad we had an opportunity to chat a little bit. We're going to continue to hold these. Thank you very much for coming. And if there's anything I can do, just please let me know.
Thank you, Congressman.
Yeah, thanks for your work. Thank you.